As we've been reporting, President Trump walked back his reciprocal tariffs Wednesday, announcing that higher levies on most nations will be put on pause for 90 days. The one exception is China. President Trump says he's increased those tariffs to 125%. For more, let's bring in Jean Sperling. Jean is the former director of the National Economic Council and assistant to the president for economic policy under former Presidents Bill Clinton and Barack Obama, and a senior advisor to former President Biden. He's also the only person to serve as a national economic advisor under two presidents. Thank you so much for being here, Jean.
Thank you.
What is your reaction to everything that happened Wednesday?
Well, I think that for a while, really the whole world was hoping that the Trump administration, President Trump, would recognize the damage that was happening in the stock market and the ultimate potential for increased damage to the economy. And you'd seen no reaction whatsoever. And so markets very much welcomed this 90-day pause. But I think that there is perhaps a little bit of over-optimism at what all this means. It is certainly, I think everybody agreed that the type of numbers they were putting on for countries like Vietnam, 46%, made no sense, didn't really have an economic rationale. And so pulling back and being able to negotiate was somewhat comforting news. But you have to remember that you still have the administration committing to 10% globally across the board, and now an unheard of 125% on China. By most estimates, that would still hurt our GDP by as much as a percentage or more of growth, and would cost the average family, $2,000-$3,000 in extra costs. So I think it was a welcome reversal. It gives some hope, but I'll be honest in saying that seeing the S&P come back nearly 10%. Felt a little bit to me like wishing away the degree of potential danger to the economy that still exists and to families, and the degree of uncertainty that is still out there for small businesses and larger businesses who still have to figure out, do they invest more, do they hire more, do they travel more, all in this period of significant uncertainty.
And Jean, I want to play something that the president said in the Oval Office Wednesday.
I blame the people sitting behind in this chair, behind this desk. This should have been done years ago. This should have been done before Obama, in all fairness. Not only Biden, Obama.
What's your response?
Well, I believe my view, and I think it was President Biden's view as well, is that, we do need to have a manufacturing revival. We do need to make sure trade is working for typical families. And I think we have seen in the past where globalization, whether it's due to technology or trade, had really devastated communities, and that we did need to make sure that when we do trade, that we are protecting our workers and protecting our communities. But there's a smart way to do that, by strategically using tariffs, by giving greater incentives, as the Biden administration did, to semiconductors being made here, to electric batteries being made here. And then there's ways you can do it that are just going to be extremely harmful. They're not well thought through. I mean, there were really no Democrat or Republican people who were not associated with Donald Trump who thought the way they were pursuing this was sound and rational. And I will still say that right now, a lot of people estimate that even with this pause, that significant damage has been done to the economy, and that we, instead of being in a soft landing with 2.8% growth, with inflation coming down, we are now at serious risk of having an actual downturn in the second quarter. Right. So yes, fight for manufacturing, fight for American workers. Don't allow trade that's going to allow us to be taken advantage of. But for God's sakes, don't raise prices on typical families. Don't make them pay $2,000 more. Okay. Don't risk the soft landing that the president inherited.
Gene Sperling, thank you so much for your time. Joining us right now is Vance Ginn. He has served as chief economist for the White House's Office of Management and Budget during President Trump's first term and is currently president of Ginn Economic Consulting. Vance, thank you so much for your time. You're a big proponent of free trade. What is your take on what we're seeing right now?
Well, it's a pleasure to be with you. And what I've seen is a lot of uncertainty. One day tariffs are on, one day they're off. One day we've got massive tariffs on every country, and then they're paused for 90 days. So what I've seen is a lot of economic uncertainty. When I'm talking to businesses, whether they be in Texas where I'm at or across the country, they don't really know how to plan. And one of the things you want to do is look into the future and see what your expected profitability is going to be. And when you have this rising cost from tariffs and other things, it really leads them to not want to act and not really want to have much economic activity. So even with this pause, there's still a 10% tariff on all other countries and 125% on China. This is a massive increase from the less than 2% average tariff that we had before today.
Vance, I want to bring up something that Jill was talking about at the beginning of the program. White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt tried to downplay fears that tariffs would push countries closer to China. Let's go ahead and listen.
You tried to say that the rest of the world would be moved closer to China when in fact we've seen the opposite effect. The entire world is calling the United States of America, not China, because they need our markets, they need our consumers, and they need this president in the Oval Office to talk to them.
Do you agree, or is there still a concern that this might drive some of our allies or even foes closer to China?
I think there still is that fear. There could be that situation. I know they said maybe 70 to 75 countries called the White House, but that means that there's another 120 countries that didn't. There's about 200 countries across the globe. And so that means many others could go to China and other places if we're putting a higher tax on Americans. And that's what tariffs are. I think we need to make sure that we understand that it's a tax on Americans when we import goods and services from other countries. And even if it's on China, look, what I've been saying is that we should be making the Trump tax cuts permanent. That should be the focus point right now because they expire at the end of this year. Cutting government spending and deregulating, that will put us in a much better situation to compete with any place across the globe and allow for more economic growth and prosperity instead of raising taxes on Americans.
All right, Vance Ginn, thank you for your time.